Hello everyone, and welcome to this review for Journey to Ungoro, and we're going to be looking at Warrior right now. So first off, the general disclaimers: this is pre-release of the set, so there's a good chance we might be wrong about a lot of these things. There's a lot of new concepts in the set, and it's going to be very difficult to analyze them until we've actually seen a lot of these things in action. We're going to be rating the cards on a scale of 1 to 5 on both viability and flavor, and as per usual we're going to start with the quest for Warrior. Warrior's quest is Fireplume's Heart. The quest is to play 7 taunt minions, and the reward is Sulphurous. So Sulphurous is a 3 mana 4/2 weapon, and it has Battle Cry. Your hero power becomes deal 8 damage to a random enemy. So essentially die insect from Ragnaros. Well, the Ragnaros hero power, like the Major Domo effect, but better because you don't actually have to, it doesn't set your health to 8. So you become Rag, but you keep your health. I think this quest reward is very, very strong. I think the fact that it's a random minion, obviously like Rag, makes it a little bit weaker. I mean, if you could choose the 8, it would be ridiculous. But it does mean that there is definitely counterplay to it in terms of your opponent flooding the board and stuff like that. I think that for both control warriors and tempo taunt warriors, it's going to be a good quest. I think it's going to be a big part of the non-aggro warriors going forward. I think it gives you a good win condition in control warrior in particular, and I think it's overall is just pretty strong. The fact that you get the weapon at the same time is not irrelevant for clearing off smaller minions. You can also follow it up with taunt, with brawl, and then you only have 2 targets to hit, either face or whatever survives the brawl if it's one of your opponent's minions. So yeah, I think Fireplume's Heart is pretty good. The one big problem I have with the quest as a whole is I feel like by the time you achieve it, you're going to be a little bit behind, because on average taunt minions are understated in terms of attack for their health, so it's going to be much easier for your opponent to get a lot more favorable trades off where their minions survive. And if you don't have good ways to take advantage of that, deal those extra last points of damage to minions, then I think you could easily fall too far behind on board for the Sulphurous to actually matter that much. That being said, Warrior does have a lot of good tools in cards like Execute, Slam, Whirlwind effects, and just generally weapons, of course. I mean, Fireworks is a very good way to finish off minions that have been damaged by your taunts, because, well, you're not going to be taking that much damage if you're taunting up all the time. I think that there's definitely going to come a balance of taunt that you want to put in the deck, because there is definitely the concern that you have too much taunt, and therefore all your minions are a little bit too understated, and your opponent's just going to favorably trade with you for days. So that's sort of the biggest worry I see with this quest. I think the reward is very good, and I think this quest is probably about a 4 out of 5 for playability. I think that the biggest difficulty is going to be balancing the number of taunt minions and which taunt minions you want. And I think that I'm going to give it a 5 out of 5 for flavor. I really like the replacing of the hero power in the late game, especially since Warrior has losing Justicar in the rotation. It means that you can't tank up anymore. So now you're just going to have to throw down instead, and that's definitely going to change the pace of control warrior games going into the late game, or any warrior decks playing this. They're going to suddenly accelerate a lot in killing their opponents, and it's going to make matches a little bit less resident sleeper. And then the other legendary for warrior for this set is King Mosh. King Mosh is a 9 mana 9/7 beast with Battle Cry, destroy all damaged minions. So this is like a mass execute that also affects your minions. That's relevant because execute is only enemy minions. So King Mosh is, I think, a little bit too slow. You kind of on paper see it as like a Jade killer, right? You go like Whirlwind onto their big Jade board and then King Mosh, and then you sort of reset the board. But a lot of the time it might just be better to play Brawl and Blood'Ika Execute or something like that. Like, there's a lot of ways that you can clear the board, and this is adding another way once you sort of run out of Brawl's effects. I think King Mosh is a little bit too expensive and a little bit understated for realistically seeing much play. I'm going to give King Mosh a 2 for viability. I just don't think it's there. I don't think it's the card Control Warrior wants at the moment, or needs really. I think the quest is a lot better for Control Warrior to just give it away to finish the game, and so it doesn't have to start dealing with 30 Jades by just, you know, tanking up and dying to all these giant Jades after it tries to remove the board so many times. And I'm going to give it a 3 for flavor. I think it's interesting to see the effect on a minion, but I don't think King Mosh is necessarily that interesting. I mean, I get it. Dinosaurs is kind of what they're doing for most of the legendaries, or for like half the classes legendaries. But yeah, unless King Mosh has some really interesting, like a really cool entrance animation or something, I don't find him that interesting. And then, so next we have Sudden Genesis. This is a 5 mana warrior spell, and it reads summon copies of your damaged minions. So it's kind of like an echo of Medivh for damaged minions. We had Blood Warriors before, which put a copy of them into your hand, and that didn't really see much play. Obviously this puts them on the board directly, but I'm not sure that this is going to see much play outside of some crazy OTK deck that I haven't really thought of yet. You know, like the Arcane Giant, and then you Whirlwind. You go like Arcane Giant, Whirlwind, Sudden Genesis, but there's no real way to charge them anymore, so I don't think that's going to happen either. It could see some play in an Arcane Giant, like Yogg deck or something like that, but I just, I mean, one of the obvious targets for this would have been something like Patron, but Grim Patron's going away now in Standard, so I just don't see Sudden Genesis having a real place. It's an interesting tempo card, and maybe a card and we'll have to think about a bit and play around a bit towards the beginning of the expansion, but I think people will not really play it much after that. So I'm going to give Sudden Genesis a 2 for viability, and I'm going to give it a 4 for flavor. I like it's using the damaged minion mechanic, which is, or the damaged minion condition, which is generally the case for Warrior, and I do like the idea that it gives a way for Warrior to grow their board very quickly. Next we have Explore Unguro. This is a 2 mana spell. Replace your deck with copies of Discover a Card. Yeah, this is bad. So the Discover a Card cards are 1 mana to discover a card. So unlike Renounced Darkness, where you replace your class cards with new class cards that cost 1 less, this is essentially making all the cards in your deck cost 1 more and be random, in that you could get anything. And, well, there's a lot of bad cards in Hearthstone, in the Classic set and in many other sets. There's a lot of cards that certainly won't synergize with each other. So I don't think Discover a Card is ever going to be a competitive effect. I think Explore Unguro is definitely just going to be a fun meme deck. Great for making Cholden videos and, Disguised Toast videos, but certainly never going to see competitive play. I'm going to give this a 0 for viability. Probably one of the lowest viability scores. In fact, I even said I was going to give 1 to 5, but this is just a 0. Like, I can't give this a 1. I feel that would feel mean to all the cards that got 1. and I'm going to give it a 3 for flavor. It's just a fun, interesting card that won't affect the meta much, and you know, there's always space for these fun cards, at least in Hearthstone. Next we have Direhorn Hatchling. Direhorn Hatchling is a 5-mana 3/6 beast, and it has Taunt and Death Rattle. Shuffle a 6/9 Direhorn with Taunt into your deck. So I believe that 6/9 costs 6. The Direhorn Hatchling is obviously very understated for its mana cost. It's essentially a Fen Creeper. Fen Creeper is not really a card you want to play, but this does give you a lot of extra value, shuffling another Taunt into your deck. And if you want to go for the Taunt Warrior quest, then this might be a way to achieve that without having to put a lot of other taunts in your deck. The taunts that the warrior has gotten are quite nicely spread out in curve, so this might see play purely for the fact that it has value for curve, but the initial body is very weak, and you know, although it's very, very cute. Oh my god, the golden one is super cute too. It is pretty weak, and that's not really something I think it's going to be that great. So the second body is a 5-mana 6/9. So obviously that body is really good, but yeah, maybe if you want to put extra taunts in your deck for the late game, so you can do a bit better going into fatigue, then yeah, then okay, then it might work. But I think this directly competes with Ali Armorsmith at the moment, and that card is a very valuable card for warriors, gaining them life and providing a taunt. In some situations this will be better purely because of the 3 attack that it has over Ali Armorsmith. Ali Armorsmith's biggest problem being that it doesn't trade that well into minions. You usually need to follow it up with a weapon or a shield slam or something like that. So Direhorn Hatchling could well see play in the warrior quest decks, especially ones that are trying to get the reward as early as possible. So I'm going to give Direhorn Hatchling a 3 for playability or viability, and a 5 for flavor because oh my god, that Direhorn is super cute. Yeah, that's all. That's the entire reason it needs a 5. And then we have Cornered Sentry. Cornered Sentry is a 2-mana 2/6 with Taunt and Battlecry. Summon 3 1/1 raptors for your opponent. So these raptors are beasts for cases where that matters, such as against Hunter or Druid maybe. And so Cornered Sentry is similar the exact same stat line to Dirty Rat, except in this case you are guaranteed giving your opponent 3 1/1s, then a card from their hand. So the question you have to ask is, against what decks is giving your opponent 3 1/1s better than giving them a card from your hand? I mean better for them, right? Worse for you. And the answer there is pretty much like Zoo. You could get very punished. Just your opponent plays Direwolf Alpha and they can trade all 3 of the 2/1s into this because they will, all 3 of the 1/1s because there will be 2/1s. Also Hunter obviously has ways to use the beast. If they Houndmaster one of them, for instance, if this isn't quite played on curve, then they can trade that one in and it will still survive. So Cornered Sentry is definitely going to have decks that it's worse against and decks that it's better against. Any decks that can basically make use of the multiple minions on board are going to be okay with this. Once again, another deck would be Shaman. They can drop a Flame Tongue Totem in between them, and then they trade 2 of the 1/1s into your Cornered Sentry, and they benefit a 1/1, which is pretty bad. So it's pretty bad against Shaman, meh against Hunter, and pretty bad against Zoo. In all those situations, you'd pretty much rather have Dirty Rat most of the time. But I think Cornered Sentry in general might well be playable. I think if the meta slows down, if the meta is more mid-range as well, then Dirty Rat is going to on average pull bigger minions. I think Dirty Rat will be more the control tool where you can Dirty Rat Brawl. Obviously you can play Cornered Sentry Brawl as well. Then you give your opponent more bad results if they get one of the 1/1s, but you don't pull an important resource from their hand, right? And if the meta is slower, then Dirty Rat is going to be the better option because you want to deny them resources from their hand as well. So I think Cornered Sentry is going to be good in some tempo-y warrior decks. I think it obviously synergizes well with Ravaging Ghoul, and another card that it synergizes pretty well with is Frothing Berserker. So I think Cornered Sentry, I'm going to give that 4 for playability. I think we'll see it in a fair few warrior decks, everything except the very control warrior decks, or if the meta is a little bit too slow. And I'm not sure that it's going to be extremely slow control mirrors. I think if we're seeing the mid-range decks, then the Dirty Rat is going to be a fair bit worse, and therefore Cornered Sentry I think Cornered Sentry is going to be just in the sort of Goldilocks zone versus Dirty Rat. Yeah. So for flavor, I am going to give it a 3. It's kind of average. I like I like what they're doing with these cards, where they give sort of overstated taunts with a downside, and this is an interesting, different downside to the ones we've seen before in Dirty Rat and oh man, I forgot the name of it. The Death Rattle from Nexramus that gave your opponent minions from their deck. Yeah. And so then we have Molten Blade next, which is a 1-mana 1/1 weapon. Each turn this is in your hand, transform it into a new weapon. So Shift to Xeris for weapons. I think this is far too inconsistent for any reasonable warrior deck. There is going to be many meme videos of people getting Doom Hammers for lethal, crazy things like that. Low-key nerf to Malkarok, because if you get this off Malkarok, that's pretty bad. And there aren't really any good weapons in the set. I think Malkarok's been getting a bit worse recently. We saw that in Mean Streets of Gadgetzan as well. But yeah, Molten Blade, not a fan of. Another meme highlight reel card, like Explore Angoro, but not quite as bad. So I'm going to give this a 1 out of 5 for viability. And a 3 out of 5 for flavor. I mean, the idea is that a Molten Blade reforges itself, right? So that's quite cool. And I think it's interesting. It's going to be interesting to see that in weapons where that like Shift to Xeris effect in weapons where the range of results is a lot slimmer, because there's obviously just a lot less weapons than there are minions. Next we have Tar Lord. Tar Lord is a 7-mana 1/11 elemental with taunt that has +4 attack during your opponent's turn. So during your opponent's turn, this is a slightly stronger Ancient of War, and during your turn, this is a 1/11 with taunt. So pretty terrible at trading. I think, as I've mentioned before, I think the Tar cards are a little overrated by most people. I think that the fact that you don't have the attack during your turn is actually going to be a lot more of a downside than most people think. But I think that Warrior is one of the best positioned classes to negate that downside. Having weapons and removal spells and whatnot, they can really take advantage of using other ways to clear minions rather than having to take the trades in their turn, because not being able to ever capitalize on favorable trades in your turn because your minion's attack is too low is going to be an issue. And I don't think we're actually going to see too many decks that have a lot of Tar minions, except maybe Warrior, and specifically the Taunt Warriors. And Tar Lord obviously also comes down later in the game, where usually if you get to that spot, you probably weren't playing against the most aggressive decks, or if you were, then you're probably winning anyway, right? So sometimes it's going to be like a last-ditch savior against aggro decks, and it's pretty good in that spot. But sometimes it's also just going to be a little bit later against mid-range decks and be a bit weak. But I think Warrior's a little stuck for taunts in this meta. So I definitely think Tarlord is going to see play in most of the warrior taunt decks, and the warrior control decks. So I'm going to give Tarlord a 4 for viability. I don't think it's a super great card if there were other alternatives for taunt, but I think that it is going to get played a fair bit because it's going to be one of the better options for warrior to complete their quest. And on flavor, I'm going to give it a 4 for flavor. I like the tar effects, and I think this is a interesting balance of tar effects. I feel like Blizzard must have tinkered with it a fair bit to get to the 11 health stat line versus just the 10 health that was maybe the obvious pick. Yeah. So next we have Ornery Direhorn. This is a 6 mana 5/5 beast with taunt and battle cry adapt. So firstly, not a lot of 6 mana taunts if you want to curve out for the warrior quest, so I think this kind of sees play even if it's not that great because of that reason. Next we have to look at a 6 mana 5/5 taunt is pretty bad. What are the good adapts is the question. So Divine Shield is okay, it's slightly better than Sunwalker. I mean, Sunwalker doesn't really see play. If that's the effect you want, you'd probably just play Sunwalker. That's kind of the 6 mana taunt that contends with this. And then we have plus health is pretty good. 6 mana 5/8 taunt is pretty good. 6 mana 6/6 taunt if you get the +1/+1. Yeah, that's okay. Only slightly better than a Lord of the Arena, which is a pretty bad card. Attack makes this pretty bad. 8/5 taunt is bad. I mean, better than Lord of the Arena, also once again a bad card. Some situations you might want attack. Wind Fury is rubbish. Stealth is useless. Can't be targeted spells abilities. That's going to be useful sometimes against decks like Rogue or something like that, but Rogues now have Vile Spine Slayer to kill stuff that is immune to spells and abilities, which is, yeah, a pretty good card. So I think Ornery Direhorn, I'm going to give it a 3 because I don't think it's a very good card, but I kind of do think it's going to see play in decks that want to curve out Brokeback in order to get to the quest. I think it might be one of the I think it might be the best taunt that warriors are going to have on 6, so I think it's going to see play. It remains to be seen how good Adapt is, really. If it's better than I sort of anticipate. I think Adapt is better on smaller minions, and I think because just because Adapt doesn't really scale, I think that it's going to be interesting to see how this Ornery Direhorn pans out. I'm going to give it a 4 for flavor. The adapting taunt is a really nice idea. The idea that you can sort of tailor it for the situation you need is really cool. I'm not the biggest fan of the adapt mechanic overall, but I think this is definitely one of the most interesting taunts that they printed. Next we have Ironhide. Ironhide is a 1 mana spell for warrior, obviously, and it reads gain 5 armor. So this is essentially shield block without the drawing a card. I think Ironhide most of the time is not going to be played over shield block, but I think there could even be some kind of Gadget Sand warrior, some kind of temporary warrior that maybe runs Gadget Sand at the top end and plays stuff like Ironhide and slams. Shield slams. And obviously Ironhide is better in that scenario because you're paying 1 mana, you're gaining 5 armor and drawing a card, so that's just better. But unless warriors are really desperate for late game card draw, I'm not sure I see that being a thing. So I'm going to give Ironhide a 2 for playability and a 3 for flavor. I like that they're giving them an alternate way to gain armor. We've got the very expensive versions in Ironforge Portal, the medium version in Shield Block, and now we've got the really cheap version in Ironhide. And I think that's good to give deck builders a lot of options about how they want to gain armor. If you're not using the armor for anything, then this is essentially a bad flash heal. But I think that most of the time you are definitely going to want to combo this with something like Shield Slam, in order to make it actually valuable. there are cases in control, if the meta was super slow and we had lots of control warrior, then sometimes gaining armor without drawing the card is better, because you sometimes just don't play your shield blocks in like let's say a control warrior mirror. Then Ironhide would be better than shield block, but I don't foresee that being the case. So yeah, so that's all the warrior cards. We have a warrior deck here that I built. I kind of put this together pretty quickly. I think this is basically this is basically a tempo taunt deck. So we have some taunt minions in the Cornered Sentries, Tar Creeper, Bloodhoof Brave, Alley Armorsmith, Direhorn Hatchling, and Honorary Direhorn and Tarlord. So we have pretty much all the the warrior taunts that we see in this new expansion to go with the quest. And then we also have Tar Creeper, neutral taunt, 3 mana 1/5 that has +2 attack during your opponent's turn, and Bloodhoof Brave, because well, that was just a pretty strong taunt. And then we have some tempo cards to help take advantage of these taunts and to try and not fall into that trap of always allowing your opponent to have valuable trades that I was talking about. We have Slam, a good way to finish off minions or weaken them so that they'll have to die when trading into your taunts. Execute, obviously, to kill the damage minions, just a very good tempo play. War Axe, because War Axe is just good, and it's a really good opening is Fire Plume Hard into War Axe. Like you get fairly far ahead by doing that, and that allows you to curve into your taunts like Ravaging Ghoul, or your taunts like Tar Creeper, and not be punished for the fact that they are weaker when attacking in your opponent's turn. And we also have Cruel Taskmaster. I think this is actually going to be pretty good on a fair few of the taunts. Obviously on Bloodhoof Brave it helps to activate the Enrage. On Alley Armorsmith it helps to make you gain a lot more armor. And on a lot of these other taunts it just helps to allow them to trade more favorably during your turn as well. I think that's going to be pretty good on the Tar cards in particular. They basically are overstated for health, so they have a little bit of health to trade in order to gain that attack that the Cruel Taskmaster gives them. I think Cruel Taskmaster is going to be a very important tempo card in this deck. And then we also have Korkron Elite, just a good card to tempo out with. Sometimes you trade into minion, like favorable trades, like into Feral Spirits or something like that. Just any 2-attack minions, and in those cases you're going to be able to protect your Korkron to make sure it gets 2 trades off. It's also there to allow you to go face if you get an aggressive start with something like the Frothing. The deck is also running Frothing as a way of actually getting damage in on your opponent, and the taunts are really good at protecting the Frothing, forcing like a lot of minion trading, which just pumps up your Frothing a lot, and is going to allow your Frothing to just absolutely dome them for a lot. And I think that's going to be one of the better ways this deck wins before it gets to the quest, basically. Frothing is a huge threat in this deck. Being protected by so many taunts, it's going to get pretty big. We also have the Ravaging Ghoul to help deal with the small minions. Obviously there's synergy with the Cornered Sentry, and it can also have some crazy scenarios where it makes your Frothing Berserker pretty big. And then we also have Grom as a sort of finisher. This obviously synergizes well with the Cruel Taskmasters, even the Slam, and yeah, it's just a good way to finish after you have maybe played the quest, hit them in the face maybe once with the quest, or sometimes if you just manage to get an aggressive start. This deck really can go pretty aggressive as well with the Frothings and the Korkrons, and then just using the taunts to protect your aggressive minions. Sort of a different way of looking at taunt. Taunt is usually considered a way to protect your hero's health, but in this case it can actually be a way to protect your minions and really gain the best use of them that you can. So I think this is a very rough idea of the deck, but I really like this combination of aggressive cards with the taunt cards, and I think that this might be one of the better ways to achieve the quest and really take advantage of that 8 damage that you're getting every turn with your hero power. So yeah, that's all I have to say for Warrior. I think Warrior is going to be pretty strong going into the new expansion. I think Control Warrior could see some play if we see the Jade decks die down a bit. It's already in a decent place in tournament formats and stuff if you want to target aggro decks like Pyro Warrior. But it has very polarized matchups across the board, so you don't really see it much on ladder. I have played it a bit at like High Legend when the meta has been very aggro shaman Pyro Warrior heavy, and it works pretty well in those scenarios. Now it has a better way to finish the game in the Fire Plume's Heart if you play enough taunts in it. And I think that Temple Warrior is going to be quite interesting. I really do think that this combination of taunts and aggressive tools that I've built it's going to take a fair bit of tinkering to get right exactly how many taunts you need, but I think that might be a way that Warrior can go. And then I think there's also just going to be some Temple Warrior decks that don't necessarily have to make use of the quest, and can maybe sometimes use some of these strong taunt minions to just create a protective barrier for their tempo minions, the minions like Frothing and that are pushing. And then obviously we're going to have the more mid-rangey taunt warriors that are just sort of rushing this quest, playing a lot more taunt. Although I don't think there's actually that many other real good taunt minions to play in the warrior deck, but it could be a more control-focused taunt warrior deck with more like spells and other removal in the slots not occupied by the taunt minions. So I think Warrior has got quite a few options. Obviously Pyro Warrior is still going to be a thing. I think there are a lot of cards in neutral and in class cards that are going to make it a bit weaker. Cards like the Tar Creeper, for instance. And I think that it might not be sort of top tier. I think Shaman is going to be pretty good against Pyro Warrior, but I think it's still going to be a deck that's actually pretty good for the meta, and that'll keep decks honest, keep decks not too greedy, otherwise they get punished for it, and it also helps punish really greedy decks like Jade Druid. So I think Warrior is going to be in a pretty good place overall. I definitely would rate it as one of the top 3 classes after the expansion, after Jenny Tungura releases, and I'm pretty excited to try out some of these Taunt and Tempo Warrior decks. So yeah, please let me know if you have any other thoughts as to sort of how you can achieve this quest, or maybe there's some other cards you think I missed that would be really good for this deck, so you can tweet at me on Twitter, obviously, or comment in the comments below. Please, like and subscribe. Helps the channel grow and helps keep me motivated to keep pumping out videos like these. Thanks a lot, everyone. We'll see you in the next video when we will be doing neutrals.